Hello everyone, this is Professor Reimer. This video is for my world history students on Wednesday, March 31st and Thursday, April 1st. It's entitled Unit 8, DOL 4, the European Imperialism. Our objective is to explain the major causes and effects of a European imperialism by creating a map of European colonies. Now, as always, let's get started with a preview. So, brainstorm about what conditions are needed for a democracy to exist. Make a list, like which ones are most important to least important, and then make a little brief explanation about why you prioritized your list as you did. I'm curious to hear what you guys what you think in the chat. So I'll see you there, or keep watching the video. All right. So before we get to imperialism and what it is and what its causes, which are our objective today, let's step back a bit and do some contextualization of what's going on in Europe in the 19th century, like internally, before we see Europe expanding and growing outward. So this is a map of Europe in 1871. A couple of things really jump out. One is just the very small number of states. If you know what Europe is like today, and by the way, I've been watching the FIFA World Cup qualifying rounds. Like the qualifying like nations competing in Europe is like 20 or 30. It's in a large number, but here we see very few kingdoms. Right, the dominant form of a state is an empire. We see the French Empire, the German Empire, the Austro Hungarian Empire, the Russian Empire got cut off there, the Ottoman Empire. Um, and so let's talk about what's going on in these various places. All right. Great Britain experienced quite a lot of stability, and a lot of these other places they were experiencing revolutions and major changes, but not Great Britain. What they saw really is an expansion of democracy as growing numbers of those middle class that we talked about as a result of the industrialization, they grew. We also see the influence of the labor movement in Great Britain working to expand access to the ballot, access to better working conditions, et cetera, et cetera. In France in the 19th century, they're going through some major turmoil, first restoring the monarchy, then the challenges to the monarchy and the creation of a republic. So they're going through quite a lot of instability. In Austria and Hungary, as a result of quite a lot of turmoil as well, they're going to create a dual monarchy. And Europe is going to, or sorry, and Russia is going to increasingly fall behind Western Europe's development. We'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. Again, this is just some contextualization to help you understand European imperialism better. Okay, there's a major war mid 19th century between Russia and the Ottoman Empire, mostly over Russia's desire to gain warm water ports through the Crimean Peninsula. It goes really, really badly for the Russians, and they're defeated, and the concert of Europe was destroyed. Remember, this is the agreement among European powers after the defeat of Napoleon that they would all get along and work to preserve the existing order. And that work to preserve the existing order is what breaks down as traditional allies of Russia didn't support Russia and traditional allies of the Ottoman Empire. So everyone's starting to feel kind of nervous about the intentions of others in Europe. Plus, in 1871, two huge unifications happened in both the unification of Germany, led by the state of Piedmont, and I'm sorry, the unification of Italy, led by the state of Piedmont, and the unification of Germany, led by the state of Prussia. And let's look at some maps. So you see here how steps to the unification of Germany. Some parts annexed, some parts won as a result of key battle. And what this does to the rest of Europe is it makes them really fearful of a powerful Germany, because with the additions of these territories and with their industrial resources, Germany is poised to become the most powerful country in Europe. And it's run almost like a military dictatorship. The emperor, he really controlled the armed forces, the foreign policy, and the bureaucracy. Even though it was democratic, it it was very militaristic and very authoritarian. Like I said, in Austria Hungary, experiencing turmoil, they're defeated in a war with Prussia, and they set up these dual competing systems, all under the one emperor, who himself was also quite uh, authoritarian. So you see here in like Western Europe, right, like growing democracy in Great Britain and somewhat in France, but in Eastern Europe, Central Europe, you see more the strengthening of the old order, this conservative movements around emperor, around the church, and that's going to come into play as we go through the 19th and then 20th centuries. The other key thing to point out about Austria-Hungary is incredibly diverse, made up of many different ethnic groups. This is just a small sampling of all the different kinds of people that lived in Austria-Hungary in 1914. I mentioned also that Italy had unified under the leadership of the Kingdom of Piedmont. You see it there in the north. So they are becoming a growing power in Europe. As I mentioned, in Russia, things are in decline, especially after the war in Crimea. They're starting to make some changes, bringing in some democracy, but really it's going to continue to be ruled by the Tsar, their emperor, who uses the army and bureaucracy to rule Russia. All right. Lastly, United States. We can't leave off our own country. Remember, they fight a major war, the Civil War between 1861 and 1865, over the issue of slavery. And as a result of that war, the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendments are passed. African Americans are given rights of citizenship, though those rights are quickly taken away in the southern states. The United States is also shifting, as we talked about previously, to an industrialized and urbanized society, and they're going to get in on this colony taking business too, especially in 1898 after they acquire Hawaii, Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines. But the focus of this lesson is mostly on, or is on, European imperialism. A couple of the key terms to point out: this movement toward unification, right, in Germany and in Italy, is fueled in large part by nationalism. Remember, nationalism is this sense of unique identity of a people, like a group that all unites behind a common language, religion, and national symbols. That was a major force unleashed by the French Revolution and the conquest of Napoleon. It is only going to uh, grow, and it has many. It's very ambiguous about. I mean, that's just one definition. There are many others, to include wanting your own state, right? Like, okay, we are a unique peoples, and in order to have freedom and autonomy, we need to have our own state. Like, think of those peoples in Austria-Hungary who are ruled by a German emperor, and they're identify as Slavic group or Czech or Serbian or something like that. So externally, that map of Europe looked pretty homogenous, but inside it is a cauldron of peoples who are going to begin increasingly to call for independence. Also, in the 19th century, you start to see strong development of very racist theories, most notably what's called social Darwinism, where this taking of Darwin's theory of natural selection, right? That organisms with the best, strongest genes, right? They survive to pass along those genes to their offspring. This is applied to modern human societies, sort of retroactively, to explain how Europeans came to dominate the world in this, imperialist um, practice that you're going to be reading about um, today. This is fueled and developing alongside what comes to be called eugenics, or the application of very false science to explain the racial sorting of individuals. The idea being that the Europeans were trying to justify how they came to rule the world, and many of them concluded that they were genetically superior because of their race. And so keep those attitudes in mind as you are reading about how Europeans took over the world. Also internally, and leading to this turmoil, is the growth of anti-Semitism. This is attitudes against Jews, and sometimes they violently took the form of a pogrom, which is an organized massacre, most notably in Russia, which had a large Jewish population, especially in its western territories. All right. Lastly, to point out that Europe at this time is incredibly competitive between those powers, right? You have the growing power of Germany, growing power of Italy, declining power of Russia, power of Britain and France, right? And they are increasingly going to be distrustful of each other, and as a result, form these defensive alliances that shift as events occur. So keep that in mind as you begin to read about imperialism. So here is the introduction to chapter 25, which is what you should be reading today. It's called The Reach of Imperialism. I really like this short introduction right here. After 1870, the industrial nations of Europe engaged in an unprecedented competition to acquire overseas colonies. A struggle for economic and military power largely motivated this intense rivalry, which historians refer to as the New Imperialism. Remember, our objective was to analyze the causes and effects of European imperialism. Right there is the key causes. Struggle for economic and military power motivated this intense rivalry. Okay. Also, key context is industrialization, which we've been talking about, right? Europeans are going to explore more territories to get more raw materials to power and put into their factories, and then those factories are going to spit out finished products that Europeans are then going to look to sell in new markets. Here is imperialism. Okay. To help you read chapter 25, I have put these three guided reading activities to help you take notes. You don't have to use them, but they're there. Also, if you would prefer to watch the crash course video and take notes, that way I'll put that link in the assignment. So if you want to gather information that way, you may. But the purpose of all of this gathering information to meet the objective of major causes and effects of imperialism is a map, all right, which is going to show some of the major effects of imperialism, and that is the taking of colonies of the British, French, German, and the Dutch in the 18th century. So I put this blank map in your assignment, and your task is to show the colonies of those four empires. How you do it is kind of up to you, but as just an example from the book, this is from chapter 25, have a key with those four countries, and then choose a color and then shade the colonies on the map. Do I say label the colonies? No, I don't, because I think that might make the map really busy. Because, I mean, look, the Europeans really colonized the entire world. So I'm not going to make you like write down the name of all the colonies. That'd be like over 100 places. No need to do that. Just as the assignment says, create a map that shows the colonies. Just shows them. Make sure I clearly can see which ones are belong to which country. And if you have any questions, see me in the Google Meet. Happy to help. And with that, see you next time.